Hey guys, so there was a lot of request to talk about the blocks, especially during the cataract surgery, the kind of blocks that we are giving. So I am making this small and crisp video so that we can have a crisp idea that why we use the peribulbar blocks, what are the advantages and disadvantages between the two. So let us start first with the retrobulbar block. Nowadays it is not used nowadays. So let us see what were the problems with this and why we stopped using this retrobulbar block. So start with the name. It is retrobulbar block. Retro means it was given behind the eyeball. So we used to give this block behind the eyeball, right, at the apex of the orbit. We used to give this behind the eyeball at the apex of the orbit, basically in the muscle cone. Muscle cone. Do you know what is muscle cone? Muscle cone, that means if this is the orbit here, so here is the annulus of Zinn, and at the annulus of Zinn, you know, there are so many muscles which are present here. So this hole is actually called as the muscle cone, and that is why there was always a risk of the damage to these extraocular muscles. So basically our main aim at this purpose was to block the third nerve. So we aim to block this third nerve before entering the rectus muscles, because we already know that all the extraocular muscles are supplied by the third cranial nerve except the SO4 and LR6. So if I am blocking the third nerve, most of the muscles will be paralyzed. Okay, so basically we were injecting this into the muscle cone, and the important thing is this only, because so many of the side effects will be based on this thing that we are going inside the muscle cone. Now look at the structures which we are actually attacking. We are blocking the ciliary nerve, the ciliary ganglion, the third nerve. We are also paralyzing the third nerve and sixth nerve. Now can you see one nerve is absent here, the fourth nerve. We are not talking about fourth nerve. I am saying that we will be blocking the ciliary nerve, ciliary ganglion, third nerve, sixth nerve. But important thing is that this is not blocking the fourth nerve. Why this is not blocking the fourth nerve? This is an important question also. So many times this question is asked that all of the following muscles will be paralyzed by the retrobulbar block except. So answer will be superior oblique, because we are not able to block the fourth nerve because it lies outside the muscle cone. So it is the only nerve which is lying outside the muscle cone, and that is why we are able to block all the nerves except for this fourth nerve. So this is an important thing. So what you are able to get with this, so there are two important things. This is called as akinesia and anesthesia of the globe. Anesthesia, everybody know, we are able to achieve the anesthesia because it is paralyzing the sensory nerve supply also. Akinesia means the movement should also be restricted, as well as sensations should also be restricted. That is the ideal aim of anesthesia, right? So we are achieving both. Now second important thing, what should be the position of the patient? So when you are going to give the blocks, obviously the position of the patient should be supine. He is ready, all set for getting the surgery, so that is good also. And basically he should be seeing in the primary gaze. That is the most convenient thing. Otherwise we may end up injecting the needle to the cornea or any other structure. So he is just supine on the OT table and looking at the primary gaze. Okay, now the site of injection. This is again very important. Try to concentrate on the figure now. This is the step number A and then this is the step number B. First of all, we have to go in the inferior fornix in the retrobulbar injection, and the plane in which you have to go. The plane first of all is straight. You have to go straight in the inferior fornix, and always remember that when we are going into the inferior fornix, the lower fornix, it's always better. Lower is towards lateral, L for L. Lower is towards lateral, so we take it at the junction of the lateral 1/3 and medial 2/3, that is more towards the lateral side. Then you are first going straight, okay, then after going straight, then you have to tilt your needle about 45 degree, and suppose we are giving total 4 ml, so 2 we have to go like this, and then rest of the 2 we have to go like this. Okay, so this is very, very important. So it's important that the patient should be lying supine and is looking in the primary position, and we are going like this straight first of all, and then we are going the inward and upward slightly. Okay, now second important thing, what should be the absolute direction of the needle? So as I say, when it is straight, okay, then at that time it is straight and backward, okay, and then when it is going upward like this, when it is going upward, then it has to go upward and medially. So first it is straight and backward like this, and then it is going upward and medially. So you have to be very clear about this. Now the volume that you take here is comparatively very less. Like for example, for the peribulbar blocks, we need 2 blocks up in the upper eyelid also and the lower eyelid also. So there the quantity is much high, while here we are using just 2 to 4 ml. Now, what are the advantages? The advantages of the retrobulbar block, first of all, the complete echinacea. Here we are able to achieve complete echinacea, while echinacea is much less in cases of peribulbar block. And though we are not doing the retrobulbar block nowadays, but this was a good advantage of retrobulbar block over the peribulbar block. Okay, second important thing, the pupil was dilated. So we will be getting the dilated pupil, and that was helpful for the surgeries also. Number 3, it was much quicker, because here we were giving the anesthesia directly into the muscle cone, and very small amount of agent was required, so it was not that painful as the peribulbar block is. But you know that if we have stopped doing it, then obviously there had to be certain complications. That is why we have stopped doing it. So what are the complications? First of all, there is always a risk of hemorrhage, because you know that the blood supply is there behind the apex, and when we are going so much of posteriorly, like you are going about 2.5 to 3 centimeter, you are going about 2.5 to 3 centimeter inside, that is up to the apex of the orbit. So obviously the chances of hemorrhage as well as the penetration, means perforation, there are high chances of perforation there. Plus, second important thing is that when you are going up to this apex of the orbit, not only there is a problem with the muscle cone, also we have a risk of injuring this optic nerve, because optic nerve is also lying there. Okay, so this risk of the optic nerve injury are very, very high here. There can be accidental injection into the optic nerve, and these things can lead to the brainstem anesthesia. It can lead to the brainstem anesthesia. Then obviously, because it is affecting the optic nerve, so it can lead to the decreased visual acuity also. And similarly, when it is affecting the optic nerve, there is a sheath injury, it can cause the compression, so there can be retinal vascular occlusion. So obviously there is a lot of risk in the great vessels occlusion is there. So that is why we have now we have left it, and we are not using this. Okay, now coming to the other things. What are the other things? We have already discussed this. Brainstem anesthesia can be there, convulsions can occur. Now this is again very important, extraocular muscle palsy. When you are going up to the muscle cone, you are injecting, you can land up in damaging also, and there can be paralysis of the extraocular muscles, and that can lead to permanent paralysis, permanent squints, limitation of movement. So that is a great problem. The trigeminal nerve nerve block and the oculocardiac reflex. Now this is again important, and many of the people had asked me also, what is this oculocardiac reflex? So let us try to see what is this oculocardiac reflex. See, its name is oculo and cardiac, right? It is a oculocardiac reflex. So this is the relation between the eye and the heart. So let us see how this is taking place. Actually, it is with the help of the stretch receptors. When you are injecting directly into the extraocular muscles, so these stretch receptors which are present in the extraocular muscles, with the help of the nerves, they are reaching this Gasserian ganglion. Now what is actually taking it to the Gasserian ganglion? It is via the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, because you know that the sensory supply is through the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve. So through this ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, which is lying at the ciliary ganglion, it is reaching to the Gasserian ganglion. You are fresh with the knowledge of anatomy, yeah? And then it is going to the nucleus ambiguous, that is to the trigeminal and the vagus. Now here we have got the nucleus of the vagus, and it is this vagus which is responsible for increasing the parasympathetic tone and the bradycardia. So it is actually many a times during giving this retrobulbar block or during any eye surgery, especially the squint surgeries, what happens, the stretch receptors can lead to bradycardia. This is actually called as the oculocardiac reflex. Okay, now what are the contraindications? So though we are not doing the retrobulbar block nowadays, but there are certain things which are strict contraindications, like first of all, if the person is having any bleeding disorder, because if he is already having a bleeding disorder, then the chances of hemorrhage are very high. Number 2, in cases of extreme myopia means when the patient has high degree of myopia, pathological myopia, degenerative myopia. In these cases also we should not do the retrobulbar block, because here the overstretching of the eyeball is there, so chances of perforation will be very high. Then number 3, if there is an open eyeball injury, then the chances of the expulsion of the contents becomes very large. And finally, the posterior staphyloma, that is related with your high myopia only. There we have overstretching, and therefore we should not do this retrobulbar blocks. Now, what are the things that we inject here? So total 2 to 4 ml of the anesthetic solution we are giving. Okay, and basically we give here 2% xylocaine with the hyaluronidase. So basically we are giving here 2% xylocaine and the hyaluronidase. Now we come to the peribulbar block. Now this is more commonly used, and most of the surgeries, intraocular surgeries, we are doing in this peribulbar block only, and that is why we are self-sufficient. Most of the time we do not require the radiologist and the anesthetist. We just require general anesthesia from the anesthetist, and that too only in a very small population of our patients, and especially the children. So this is called as the peribulbar block. Why peribulbar block? Because we are giving in peribulbar space. Here we are giving peri, means in the peripheral spaces we are giving. We are not giving in the retrobulbar space. We are not going backward. So obviously the complications of the hemorrhage, the perforation, the extraocular muscle damage, these will be very less here. And from this peribulbar space, it will be going to the lid also. So we are getting the echinasia, and it is going to the other spaces. So if you look at the effect, I am getting the globe as well as orbicularis. Orbicularis means orbicularis oculi present in the lid. Both echinasia as well as the anesthesia, means there will be loss of the movements also, as well as loss of the movements, as well as we also get the loss of the sensations. So though the amount of the echinasia, loss of movements, is not as good, but yes, sufficient amount of echinasia is also obtained. Now, what are the agents that we are using? There we were using the xylocaine or lignocaine along with the hyaluronidase. But if you see here, we are using so many things. I am using again 2% lignocaine, but along with this I am also using 0.75% bupivacaine. I am using hyaluronidase as well as the adrenaline. So total we are using about 8 to 10 ml. 8 to 10 ml we are using, and if I say practically, we use total 10 ml, like 5 ml we inject in the upper eyelid and the 5 ml we inject in the lower lid. Okay. Now they are saying that it is 8 to 10 approximately. So I am telling you that practically we use 10 ml so that we have sufficient amount, because what happens sometimes that if you give insufficient amount of this agent, then even before completion of the surgery the moments start coming. So you should not take any risk. 10 ml is fine. 5 in the upper eyelid and 5 in the lower eyelid. Now what are the insertion points? Now that is again very important. Look here, there are 2 insertion points here. We have got number 1 and number 2. We have 2 insertion points, and if you see the plane in which you are giving injection here are also different. Here we are giving 2 injections, one in the upper eyelid and one is in the lower eyelid. Now as I told you, L for L, so this is towards the lateral margin. So the upper one is given at the junction. This upper one will be given at the junction of the medial 1/3 and the lateral 2/3. So this is towards the medial side, while lower one will be towards the lateral side. So this will be given at the junction of the medial 2/3 and the lateral 1/3. So these things should be very, very clear to you, and we are going straight. We are going straight here. So it is like this, we are going straight, and similarly here also we are going straight. And after the injection of this fair amount of anesthetic, sometimes we also use the corneal anesthesia before these injections, because otherwise the patient will not let you inject this. So what we do, we have to apply a strong amount of pressure also, ocular massaging also, so that the effect of the anesthesia is full as well as it's also good. So let us see this. So I have told you the junction of the middle 2/3 and the lateral 1/3. This is your lower eyelid, okay, and upper may we are coming nearer to the middle canthus, okay. Now the position of the patient. Position of the patient again here is in supine position. Primary gaze, that will remain the same. Uses it all the intraocular surgeries we are doing, cataract surgery, glaucoma surgeries, keratoplasties, vitreoretinal surgeries, squint surgeries, means all the intraocular surgeries in common, I can say all the intraocular surgeries we are doing this peribulbar block, okay. Now what are the advantages? Advantages are all which were the disadvantages of the retrobulbar block: lesser chances of injury, less chances of optic nerve damage, less chances of brainstem anesthesia, less chance of extraocular muscle paralysis, less chances of hemorrhage, perforation, all these things are less. But what are the disadvantages? It's a painful condition. So even the anesthesia that you are giving for the cataract surgery is painful. So that is an irony. We can use a topical anesthetics over the cornea before that. Then secondly, a high amount of chemosis occurs, because whatever you are injecting, we are going straight, and that injection is given even either the transcutaneously or transconjunctivally. So because this agent is going into the conjunctiva, it can cause the ballooning of the conjunctiva. So we can even have the ballooning of conjunctiva. And third, as I told you, that it is giving you lesser akinesia in comparison to the retrobulbar block. So some amount of movement can be there, okay. So this was about the things. Now what are the questions that can be asked? See, I don't want you to go in much of the detail because there is no end. But the thing is that you should know what are the first of all the positions. In both the cases we have the position, that is primary gaze and supine position, okay. Then how much amount it is given? It is just 2 to 4 ml in the retrobulbar block, and it is about 10 ml, 8 to 10 ml in cases of the peribulbar block. Then number 3, what are the spaces in which you are giving? In the retrobulbar block, it is a retrobulbar space. In the peribulbar block, it is a peribulbar space. So in the retrobulbar block, we are giving just one injection in the inferior fornix. First it is straight and then at an angle of 45 degree. In peribulbar block, 2 injections are used parallelly. They are going one upward, one lower, and upward is towards the medial side, L for L, lower is towards the lateral side. Then another important thing, what are the disadvantages? The hemorrhage, the perforation, extraocular muscle paralysis, optic nerve injury, all these things took place in retrobulbar block, and that is why it is obsolete. Though the lesser amount of the agent was used, it was not that painful, more amount of akinesia, but because we cannot help with these side effects, so we have now done with this and we are not doing this. While the peribulbar block, we are using more amount of agent, ballooning is taking place, painful it is, but though it is giving you lesser amount of akinesia, but then also fairly amount is there. Then you should also know that how to keep these needles are going parallel to the orbital flow, so they are first the straight and backwards, and then it is going upward and medially. Okay, then another important thing is that the muscle which is not paralyzed by the retrobulbar block was the superior oblique, because fourth nerve was lying outside the muscle cone. So that was all about the peribulbar block and retrobulbar block. Hope this video will help you, and do subscribe to my channel, and also tell me in the feedback and the comment section that what are the other videos that you like me to make and help you. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.